Hello, everyone, and welcome to a pre-Christmas podcast titled The Color of Hope. In the last several weeks, we all would be perhaps excused just a bit if we found ourselves suffering from depression, perhaps disgust, feeling bad about the future of not only our country, but other countries as well, with the random shootings that have taken place from Rob Reiner in California, who directed When Harry Met Sally, to the students at Brown, young, teenagers still, their lives taken. A brilliant professor at MIT killed, the father of three. The awful tragedies in Australia and perhaps other parts of the world we haven't yet heard about. We seem to be in a divisive mode, or at least our politicians do. Nobody, it seems, treats the other with very much kindness, which is too bad. So I was looking around these last few days as to whether or not it would be hypocritical or wise or smart to try to do a podcast on hope, because it doesn't seem that there's much hope out there right now. But if you think that's true, I concluded that we would all be wrong or mistaken. There are shoots of kindness everywhere you look, every single day of your life. We maybe are not as divisive as we think we are, or as the news media or social media tends to make us. People are still wanting to celebrate Christmas, celebrate other holidays that are important to them and their religions, and be nice to one another. I had thought for several weeks about doing a podcast with my friend Wade Smith, who's now retired from the practice of law, and we discussed it. And the thrust of the podcast was going to be about some cards that he has prepared over the last 10 to 12 years and mailed out to friends of theirs, his and Ann's friends, at Christmas time or winter time. They all sometimes don't go out before Christmas. One came one year after March. They're really a celebration of life and a celebration of the natural beauty of North Carolina. And he picks a spot every year or some animals every year, such as the red wolf or the wild horses of Currituck County on the Outer Banks, or the mountains of western North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Appalachian Mountains. Did you know that the Appalachian Mountains are older than the Rockies and older than the Alps? It's true. 480 million years old, approximately, when they first began. So taking the long view, they have withstood a lot. And they're sort of rolling mountains. They're not the tallest mountains. They only go to about 6,000 or 7,000 feet high at the tallest peaks, unlike the Rockies or the Alps, which are much higher. He writes about the lighthouse just recently in Ocracoke. And I'm going to read a little bit from that in just a moment. What he does is he prepares a card, a fold-out card, And because since he was 5 years old, he has liked to draw, and sometimes with pen and ink, sometimes with watercolor. He fashions a covering that is unique to him. And so I want to take a preview of what we would have done, because we're going to do it in January and talk about these. He's going to read from some of them and show them to you. At the same time, I want to talk about a couple of them today because they are relevant to what we're talking about in terms of hope. I went over to his house, 4 or 5 days ago. We sat in a back den in front of a roaring fire, just the two of us, and talked about cards. I met him a little over 46 years ago in the spring of 1979, when he was one of the two major defense lawyers for the Green Beret Dr. Jeffrey McDonald. And we became friends during that trial. And we tried numbers of cases against each other, sometimes with each other. And then he represented me as well when I got into difficulty years ago. So it was unique to start out in the legal profession with an adversary and wind up 40 some odd years later as friends. And it's possible, and it's probably done every single day. Adversity with your enemy, with your opponent, does not have to be permanent, and you don't need to treat them as enemies. They're just your opponent. When people say, well, how can lawyers duke it out, during a trial and then have lunch or dinner or a drink sometime afterwards? Well, that's not being disloyal to your client or the side that you represent. It's life, in recognizing that, tomorrow is always another day. So the first card that Wade and I talked about was one, and I'm going to show you right there. If you're seeing this, you can see this card. Those are woods in the mountains. And he draws a small rabbit that's in one of the branches of the trees. You might see it if you look closely. It took me a while to catch it. Calls it an Appalachian cottontail. This is what he writes. At this time each year, we select some feature of the natural beauty of our state to celebrate. In the past, we have chosen North Carolina's red wolves to highlight. We have chosen the Outer Banks ponies, the ancient bald cypress trees of the Three Sisters Swamp along the Black River. This year, this was a couple of years ago, we celebrate our stunningly beautiful forest lands. We celebrate the native trees of North Carolina. Wherever they grow, we celebrate them for their beauty, for their life-sustaining gifts to us, and the wild creatures that depend upon them. We are told that 2 large trees produce enough oxygen in a year for a family of 4. In addition to many state parks, North Carolina is home to the Great Smoky Mountains and 4 national forests. And together they total about 1.5 million acres of forest land. The December moon rises in the high country of North Carolina and paints silver the land of the timber rattler and the black bear and the Appalachian cottontail. More than 1.5 million acres of great trees still stands strong in our state and say to us, we are still here. It is not too late. Our trees are still there. Taking the long view, there's much to be hopeful about in this state, and I am certain in other states all over the United States and all over the world. We just have to look for it. That's all we have to do. The most recent card that I have received is this. That's a watercolor drawing that Wade did of the lighthouse at Ocracoke. In the Three Sisters Swamp along the Black River, the ancient bald cypress trees, some of the world's oldest, have added another year to their time on earth. They proudly sway in the frigid night. In the Alligator River Refuge, and red wolves are on their nightly prowl. Nearby, the timber rattler rests quietly. It is the time of the high festival. And at this time, each year we choose some feature of our home. This year, we celebrate one of North Carolina's most recognizable symbols of hope and resilience, the Ocracoke Lighthouse. Built in 1823 at a cost of $11,359, this lighthouse is our state's oldest working lighthouse. It is visible 14 miles offshore and has sent forth its life-saving signal for more than 200 years. Although it lacks the fancy diamonds and swirls of its nearby cousins and stands only 75 feet tall, the Ocracoke Lighthouse is a symbol of irrepressible faith and hope. That's a unique card to get in the mail from someone, either one. You can see what made him a good trial lawyer. I was laughing with him just yesterday, and I was telling his family that they could read that card and see what made him a good lawyer or a great lawyer. For he made the timber rattler and the red wolf and all these creatures seem to be your friends, as though you would want to go up and speak with them. The ability to charm a jury was still there. I was there yesterday visiting for a short time, and his daughter, Robin, was there. I've known Robin for a long time. She's been an artist. She has been a journalist. She has had a podcast of her own. She's interviewed famous people. And somehow we came to be talking about a friend of both of ours. We did not know this at the time. A lady named Judy Clark. Judy was raised in Asheville, lives now in another part of the western part of the state, and for a long time has been a federal public defender in criminal cases, high-profile criminal cases, representing some of the most awful cases and awful clients you could possibly imagine. And her goal has always been to make sure that the government, the federal government in these cases, did their job and require them to prove beyond a reasonable doubt their guilt, or to negotiate a settlement that would somehow spare the life of her client. She's been successful. She's had great victories for herself and her clients, and she's had some stinking defeats, such as the life of practicing law. But it was remarkable to just talk about her and realize in our midst, one of the giants of criminal law, from a defense point of view in the federal court system, How could you be depressed and sad when you're talking about somebody like that? How could you be depressed and sad when, as I walked in, and Wade's grandson, Robin's son, is reading the book Fatal Vision about the McDonald case. And Wade turns to me and says, Jim, my family and my children and grandchildren, they just think of me as their granddad or dad. They don't think I'm anything special. But now you walk into the door and they think differently about you. And I laughed and I said, you guys need to understand that here's one of the best lawyers North Carolina has ever produced. His grandson wants to go to law school to carry on the family tradition. Isn't that cool? How can you be depressed and sad when you have that kind of hope in the future? How can you be depressed and sad if you've listened to any of my podcasts, to Abby Early, who went through her own bouts of depression, did not think she would graduate from UNC Chapel Hill, and then graduates on time? Or Haley Hayslip, who played softball for the NC State softball team, and whose greatest memory is hitting a home run with her grandmother in the stands. She's now graduated. Both of them have graduated. Or Patrice Nealon, who teaches these students at State in marketing and research like that. And they are the people of the future. You cannot be depressed when you see young people working and studying so hard and doing so well. Jenna Burns, who's worked with me for a while and has gone on to bigger and better prospects. And one of the very best, what she's doing, graduated just a couple of years ago from NC State. Or the young boy who was a senior at State, was a walk-on, and played in the ACC championship game a couple of years ago when State beat Carolina. And I remember asking on the podcast, when did you know that you were going to win? He said, I thought we were going to win when the coach put me in. If he put me in, we had it wrapped up. And I laughed. So, these sorts of things remind me of what Nelson Mandela once wrote in a letter to his wife when he was still in prison in South Africa, that hope is the most powerful weapon that there is when all else seems lost. So if you want to know what you can do right now about the state of life in this country, one of the things you can do is have hope and be a hopeful person and act on your hope with other friends and people. It's the most powerful weapon in the world, wrote Nelson Mandela, when all else seems lost. In early October, I went to Chitola, which is a resort just outside the city limits of Blowing Rock. Or it may be in the city limits of Blowing Rock. I'm not sure. And it was early in the morning on a Saturday morning. I'd done a program on Friday the day before. It was cool, but not cold. But you needed a jacket. And I walked out early in the morning. The sun had just come up. There was one lady down on a bench, park bench, sitting by the water or a lake that's adjacent to the hotel. And I walked over after she left to where she was sitting, sat down, looked at the water, and the mist was going across the water. And then over by some trees, and saw the mist moving across the water. It's beautiful. How could you be depressed in the early morning when all is quiet and you see nature at its very best? You know what you could do this Christmas season? Turn on your Christmas tree lights in the early morning hours when it is still dark outside. Don't turn on anything else, just your Christmas tree lights. You're not doing it for your neighbors, the people who walk by. You're doing it for yourself. and your family. Look at the tree. Have a cup of coffee if you wish. Don't move. Just think. How in the world could you be depressed looking at such a sight? It's just as cool to look at it early in the morning as it is when there are lots of people around or late in the evening. One of the things that I've been trying to focus on over the last few weeks and a couple of months, really, because I've taken a hiatus from my podcasting, is what kind of podcasts I wanted to do. Did I still want to do them? Were they worthwhile? Did anybody care? I thought about all of this. I was struck by the fact that the most popular podcasts that I have done, in many respects, have been ones on the Jeffrey MacDonald murder case from so long ago, in another lifetime. And I have come to the conclusion that yes, I want to continue doing these podcasts. And yes, I still want to do programs on grit and resilience. I will take a bow to the MacDonald case and do a series of new programs on the MacDonald case in the next few weeks and months. But for right now, grit and resilience is still up there with me because you see it every day. And it's what people really need to hear about the future more than any single thing else. I had never heard of the word regret, never thought about resilience until it came to me many years ago now, many years ago, when I got into legal difficulty and had to start over. I was telling somebody not long ago that in looking back at my life, there have been two great moments, I would say. The first was when I decided to become a lawyer and became one. And the second one was after I had stopped being a lawyer, learning how to pick myself up, start back over, and reinvent myself as best I could, doing something else. The world loves to give second chances. They do. I'm the beneficiary of that. But you have to want to try. You've got to get off out of the sofa or out of the chair and try. It's not always easy. There's some defeats along the way. But looking back, it is worth it. I get kidded a lot about some of the books that I read or the shows that I watch on television. I tend to binge watch shows that make me smile, that I know how they're going to end, and they're always going to be happy endings. I really do. I binge watch too many Christmas shows just that way every year. I read some of the same type books. I don't have to read criminal fiction because I know about all of that. I want to read about something else particularly, and that is happy stories. Complex, perhaps, but ultimately happy. The most recent book I read is by a famous novelist who writes 2 or 3 books a year. This one was titled The Color of Hope, which is where I got this title from. In the book, this woman, happily married, learns that her husband has ALS, is going to die soon, which he does. She moves from her home in California to travel around the world because she has 3 children spread in different countries. She winds up or lands in the southwest corner of a small town in France, where she rents a home. She was an artist in her life. She's trying to figure out what to do, and she starts to paint. And paints what she sees of the town in which she is living. They ask her to do a mural of the town, which she does, and for the title, she gives it The Color of Hope. That's what the title is of her mural, based in part upon the blue shutters that adorn so many of the homes in the town. So I said to a program group not long ago, what color would you choose? What color would you choose to represent your life? Would it be green, which is growth and rebirth? Or would it be yellow, or orange, which can be happy colors? What would you choose? How does it define you, if it does? What I was trying to do, of course, was to get people to focus on their lives and to see the positives that are there. I was struck by the news that came out after Rob Reiner's death. When it came that he changed the ending of the movie When Harry Met Sally. Initially, Harry and Sally were not going to make it. They were each going to go on their separate ways and talk and just walk away from each other. Sort of like what happened in the movie The Way We Were. And then he met his future wife during the filming of the movie, fell in love, and changed the ending. So that as you remember on New Year's Eve, Harry is running down the streets of New York to find Sally, and does. And she asks him what he's doing and why he's there. And he says to her, and I'm paraphrasing this, he says to her, well, when you figure out that you want to spend your life with somebody, you ought to try to start as soon as possible. And that's the way the movie ends. A movie, a fictional story, changed because of a real life happenstance that he met his wife that way. You know, I have in my closet one of those boxes that you get from Staples or somewhere like that, clear boxes, that's filled up with cards and letters, scraps of paper. I don't read things in there very often. They're the cards and letters that were written to me by so many countless individuals years ago in support and expressions of unconditional friendship when I was at the bottom of the ladder and trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. I'm never going to throw them away. They are part of who I am. I don't necessarily want to read them all because they sort of bring back a sad time, but they also bring back an uplifting time in that you see so much friendship and well-meaning thoughts by people who write to you and do this sort of stuff. And it just makes you feel good. I want to say to you all that this Christmas, think about what the future may be. We've had tough times before in this world. I wrote about a couple of World War II songs. The White Cliffs of Dover. The bluebirds will fly once again over the white cliffs of Dover. Just you wait and see. Or the haunting song, A Nightingale sang in Berkeley Square in London, trying to give some hope to people going to war. Did you know that the song I'll Be Seeing You or I'll Be Home for Christmas, where it comes from? I'll Be Home for Christmas is a World War II song about the soldiers hoping to come home. If people can write these melodies at one of the worst times in the history of this world over the last several hundred years, then surely we can do as well right now. We don't have to write a song or write a book or change a movie or any of those things, but they're found in little acts of kindness every day to someone. President Carter once gave a speech to a graduating class at Emory University in Georgia. And he said, you know, the three most important lessons in life from the Bible are kindness, kindness, and kindness. Yesterday, Robin says, Jim, I still remember when you offered Wade 10 minutes of your time so he could make at least a partial closing argument in the McDonald case. That was so gracious. Wade's sitting right there and he looks at her and he says, yeah, that's true. Jim, that was nice. But you know what? Jim knew, or he should have known, that the jury would say, well, that is very nice of Mr. Blackburn to do that, and give him some kudos for that. And I have laughed before and spoken before about the time years ago, actually a long time ago, in the early 1980s, when we were against each other in the trial of the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, Jimmy Green, on serious charges. The jury is only out a couple of hours, but shortly after they went out, one of the jury, the marshals or the deputy sheriffs came up to me and said, Jim, I don't think I can tell you what's going on in the jury room, but I will tell you that they are in there laughing. And I said, that's not good. He said, no, I don't think it is either. I remember going to meet Wade and telling him this. And he said, well, that's good for me. I said, well, I know, but not for me. What can I do? What am I going to say to the public if I lose this case? I've never lost a case like this before. He said, well, let's think about it. We went into a room off the courtroom, small room, sat down at a table. He pulls out his pen and starts to make notes on a yellow legal pad, tears it off after writing a couple of sentences, gives it to me and says, what do you think of that? And I looked at it, read it quickly. I said, can I have this and use it? He said, it's yours. He tore it off, gave it to me. I folded it up and put it in my shirt pocket. A couple hours later, I stood in front of a lot of microphones outside the Wake County Courthouse, lots of reporters, and read word for word what he had written. That the day was a great day in North Carolina because the lieutenant governor has been found not guilty of the charges of bribery. Of course, that really wasn't what I was necessarily thinking at the time, but that's what I said. And for weeks and months, I got kudos from people across the aisle, so to speak, saying how gracious that was. What a nice thing to do. And all I did was read what he had written for me. So kindness goes both ways. Kindness goes both ways. It really makes a difference. It made a difference in the practice of law. They don't teach kindness as much as they should. And maybe it's not quite as that way as much as it was. But I'll bet you there are instances of that everywhere. Everywhere. So this Christmas, have some hope and have a Merry Christmas. And I hope to see you again real soon. And I hope some new interesting interviews with a number of different people coming up in the next few weeks and months. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed or watching it if you can do that. And I hope to see you soon. Thanks very much.